Thank you.
And we're now recording.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone, to the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority Operations Committee. This is the meeting for Thursday, April 29th. It's 3 p.m., 3:05 right now. And can we do a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Bolinas Fire.
I'm here, George Krakauer.
Thank you. City of San Rafael.
Darren White's here.
Thank you. Larkspur. County of Marin. Inverness. Kentfield Fire.
Mark Pomey.
Thanks, Mark. Muir Beach.
Chris Gove.
Thank you. Nevada Fire.
Present.
Thank you. Sleepy Hollow.
Present.
Southern Marin.
Present.
Marinwood.
Darren White will probably stand in for Eric Drykosen.
Thank you. Mill Valley.
Virtually present, sir.
Thanks, Alan. Stinson Beach. Corte Madera. Fairfax. Town of Ross.
Here.
Last but not least, San Anselmo.
Here.
Thanks, Dave. We have 10 present with a quorum.
Thank you very much, Director Brown. So I realize everyone knows this, but just for the record, this is a virtual meeting of the Operations Committee of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and pursuant to Executive Order N2920 issued by the Governor of the State of California, there will not be a public location for participating in this meeting, but any interested member of the public can participate telephonically by utilizing dial-in information printed on the agenda. If any member of the public has a request for a reasonable modification accommodation for accessing this meeting due to a disability, he, she, they should contact Mark Brown. And for those of you that have dialed in, if you use the *9, that will allow you to raise your hand. And then once you're recognized, the *6 to mute and unmute. So we've called to order. We've done the roll call and agenda adjustments. Anything from anybody? Okay, I actually do have a couple of adjustments to make. What I'd like to do is move up the Fire Safe Marin update. I'd like that to come right after item number 6. And then following that would be the Zone Haven evacuation plan study update. That will follow, so that will become, so Fire Safe Marin will become 7, Zone Haven evacuation plan will become 8, committee reports will become 9, and then 10, 11, 12 as it moves on down. Any objections to those changes? Okay, and then the other thing I noticed, Mark, I did not see the minutes. And so that would normally be done under consent, I would imagine, but I didn't get a copy and I didn't see them. So I'm assuming those will roll to the next meeting. You're muted.
We'll make sure they get caught up in the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so now it's item number 4, open time for public expression, and the public is welcome to address the Ops Committee at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to the Government Code Section 5495 4.2, that the committee is not permitted to discuss or take actions on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting. Mute your microphone when you are not reporting out. Mark, can you tell, do we have any hands raised for public comment?
And I'm looking for any raised hands, and I do not see any.
Very good. We're going to move on then to item number 5, Executive Officers Report. Chief Mark Brown.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'll keep this super short so that we can get on to business. At the executive committee meeting and the board of directors, I made a presentation on North Ops' predictive services 4-month outlook that's they consider it valid through July. And I have emailed that presentation out to all of the fire chiefs in case they want to present it to their boards or councils. And I can support as needed, but I think the boards and councils want to hear it from their fire chief, their local subject matter expert. But in a nutshell, the heavy fuels were trending not quite at average, but just below average, and they were trending along the typical drying out kind of scale of a nice gradual drying period. When I first gave the presentation at the beginning of April, and then when I gave it the next time, they had updated that fuel moisture chart. And with the lack of rain late in April, that decline almost went vertical. So we're seeing the heavy fuels plummeting faster than I've ever seen it plummet. And we know what that will mean for large fire growth. I think you all are well informed that I'm excited to announce that Ann Krelock has been hired as our planning and program manager. She will start on May 17th. Very much looking forward to that. We will be receiving 2 presentations from our environmental consultant proponents on May 6th at the executive committee. We received 2 excellent proposals, one from Ascent Environmental and one from Panorama Environmental. It's going to be a difficult decision to choose between the 2, which is a great spot to be in. And so we look to the executive committee to make a recommendation to the full board, which environmental firm that we'll go to. We received some great feedback from the board regarding our communication strategy. And the intent is to absorb the comments that we received from the board, wrap it into the draft study, and make it part of the consent calendar so we can start moving forward with our communication strategy. We did get approval to accept 2 Grizzly Corps fellows. Again, that's of their Grizzly Corps is connected to AmeriCorps. They provide recent college graduates as fellows, and we, as the MWPA, will be paying $20,000 for each of them, and they'll work for us for 11 months. They have 2 specific project areas. One of the fellows will be working on defensible space education and basically creating a culture change within the county of what's beautiful around people's homes, and driving home the message of fire smart landscaping, and that we're not asking people to clear cut around their homes. We're asking them to have fire smart landscaping. The other half of that fellow will be supporting our smaller member agencies, specifically Muir Beach, Stinson Beach, Inverness, and Bolinas, since they really do not have the bandwidth to be able to work with the additional funding that they're receiving. So we want to give them a little support so they can be as effective as they can with the funding. The second fellow will be working on large scale, multi-thousand acre type projects, at least the planning phase. We don't feel that we'll be ready to implement those types of projects for another 3 or 4 years, but we know there's many stakeholders that need to be brought together, many hurdles that we need to get over. So we want to start that planning process now, so that when we as an organization are ready to do these large projects, all the legwork has already been done and we can immediately get into that mode. And the last piece is the COC has been actively working on their bylaws and their policies and procedures. They are 1 step away from approving their policies and procedures. And they're now starting to look forward to how they're going to perform their duty of providing the end of the year report based on the audit and based on our financial reports. And also they've been very active in watching all of our meetings and tracking where we are with our projects and making sure that we are in alignment with the tax language. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Director Brown, this is Darren White. I just have one question regarding what you just offered regarding the COC. I think I heard you say they were 1 step away from approving their policies and procedures. Who else has a look at those policies and procedures to weigh in on them?
Any member of the public would be able to offer any comments that they have, but the COC will be able to approve their policies and procedures. The board of directors don't have the authority to approve or disapprove of the bylaws and policies and procedures.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Executive Director Mark Brown? Okay, thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate that. It looks like a couple more of our panelists have joined us. Just for the record, want to show that they're there.
Yeah, Garrett Toy, I see you arrived. Thank you. Hi, Garrett.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, so the next item then up is the presentation. So what I'd like to do is introduce to you all the CEO for Genesis, which was formerly the LRAD Corporation. He's the CEO, and they're going to provide us with some information on their multimodal hardware and software solution, focusing on their capabilities and value of integrated emergency warning systems. For those of you that are aware, Mill Valley, I believe, was the first in California to install these systems in their town. Since then, Laguna Beach, Newport Beach, Mammoth Lakes, and others have installed the systems to warn and protect their populations. There was a link to their website that was in the agenda, and Mr. Danforth is going to give us a presentation, allow us to ask additional questions about their warning system.
Good afternoon.
The floor is yours.
Okay, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, great. Well, Bill, thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity. Those of you who don't know Genesis, we are a publicly traded company headquartered here in San Diego. We do all of our manufacturing and design work here in San Diego, as well as facilities in Ottawa, Canada, and in Madrid, Spain, and sales offices around the world. We put, in order to be as brief as we can and get as much information over to you as we could, we put a brief video together that will be illustrative of what the Genesis system can do. And if we can share the screen, we will play the video and then open it up for Q&A.
And you should be able to share the screen if you have someone working behind the scenes for you.
We do. Just give us 1 minute. We're doing it.
Okay.
Nothing.
Looks like we just lost them.
Okay, let's give them a minute to go ahead and hop back on.
Okay. And I'll look for them to come up on the attendees and I'll move them over.
Yeah, and also, Mark, if you can, I think that they had forwarded us a link to a video that maybe we can have that ready if they.
I have it ready to go if they need me to.
Thank you.
Hey, can I jump in with a quick question for Mark? Can you repeat the names of those two environmental firms?
Yeah, Ascent, ASCENT, and Panorama.
Thank you much.
Okay.
All right, welcome back.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
Are you able to share the screen? You're sharing now? Good. All right, sorry about the delay, and we'll hopefully turn the video on and have it work right now.
Very good.
Genesis delivers life-saving notifications and information to people at risk before, during, and after disasters and other critical events. Make sure residents, visitors, and tourists have the information they need to stay safe by deploying the multi-channel Genesis unified public safety platform. Genesis systems seamlessly integrate with hazard detection sensors, third-party feeds, national and emergency protocols. Here's how Genesis would be deployed in Marin County. The cloud-based Genesis platform would be managed centrally at the Marin County Sheriff's Emergency Operations Center. Genesis speaker arrays would be installed in communities and other populated areas. Threats, including wildfires, earthquakes, flooding, landslides, and tsunamis, are detected and managed from the unified Genesis dashboard. Emergency managers then assess the severity of the critical event and deliver multi-channel alerts and notifications to the affected zones. Genesis can also connect to people in specific geographic areas and when integrated with Zone Haven, assist emergency managers in evacuating populations systematically to safety. Messages will be created, managed, and distributed across multiple channels, audibly through Genesis speaker arrays, and digitally through SMS, voice calls, application messaging, digital displays, desktop alerts, social media, and through the Zone Haven app. Genesis systems are in service in 72 countries, including more than 450 cities, counties, and states in the U.S. Genesis systems are deployed in Laguna Beach, Newport Beach, Mill Valley, the Port of Houston, Japan, Puerto Rico, and Australia. Make sure Marin County residents have the information they need to stay safe by deploying the multi-channel Genesis Unified Public Safety Platform.
Okay, well, that's, I don't know how many of you know a lot about Genesis, but what we did was what Bill mentioned earlier. We started in the integrated system work in Mill Valley probably 2 years ago now. And it has spread beyond the state of California to countries around the world that we're prosecuting opportunities in. So can I answer any questions? And I don't know if Charlie's on, but Zone Haven and Genesis have been working together for some time to provide interoperability between the Zone Haven tool and the Genesis GEM platform. We will roll it out in a community in California that's not represented here today. But that shows great promise, frankly.
And I don't see Charlie in the audience, so I guess he's not here today.
All right, well, I can answer a question for Charlie or defer.
This is Bill, Mr. Danforth. I apologize for if there's any technical stuff on our side. I don't know that the volume came across as it may have for you.
Oh,
It was fairly muted for us, although I think we could make out some of it. I'm just wondering if we can get a link of that video. If you will give us permission, we'll go ahead and post that so that folks can follow up and watch that again.
we'll send you, Bill, we'll send you the link right now.
Okay, great.
And I'll post it on the MWPA website underneath the Operations Committee meeting notice on our website.
Terrific. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just start and say to Alan, who's on here, who has it installed in Mill Valley. I know the fire prevention officers and fire chiefs received a good presentation in Mill Valley when they were testing a system before it was installed. And everyone was very impressed with the clarity and also the volume, the sound that we could hear. But I'm wondering, Alan, if you wanted to just talk about, what it's meant for your community, whatever peace of mind or something that they might have, or what it's been like working with the company, if you have any comments for the rest of us.
You related to LRAD?
Yes.
Yeah, so we tested these out right as I got there a couple of years ago as the police chief. Certainly the geographic locations and topography can impact individual results, but collectively we feel that they've been certainly additive to the array of communications we use in Mill Valley. There's been some concern amongst a couple of our electeds, related to, I think, the expectation that this was going to be, a one-stop shop for being able to notify people. It's not that. We need to accurately represent, reflect expectations to our community that this is one tool amongst many. But on a nice Saturday morning when we, flip the switch on those things monthly. They work well. I know Genesis has been very responsive to working with Chiefs Tubbs and Welch in terms of dialing the thing in accurately. And I believe we're, at least in Southern Marin and Mill Valley, we're going to move forward with adding another 2 locations that will, mutually benefit our service areas.
And thank you. And I'll point out as well, folks, that our system has been designed it's a command and control system that's open and cloud-based. So although not here for Mill Valley, it has the capability. This function is not in Mill Valley. The function to add digital sensors to the command and control suite, be it earthquake detector, landslide detections, that kind of thing, and display that threat on at the emergency management center on that same display, is also a function that the system is in fact capable of. And that's somewhat of the the audio you probably couldn't have heard, Bill. But you should have the link now.
Does anyone else have any questions for Genesis? Yeah, Chief White from San Rafael.
Good afternoon. I guess my question is the goal or the effort here to ensure that we're doing this consistently countywide instead of just individual communities, or are we looking at those individual agencies that may have an interest joining this effort in this notification system?
It's really up to each individual city and town to decide, what range of tools that they want to, bring to their communities. There are some limitations with the way sound travels in, hilly areas, et cetera, where it may not be as effective or may not be, what people are expecting. And so I think it's up to each town to decide how and where. It may be something that would be very good for one area of your town, but not in others. And so will there be an expectation on behalf of your citizens that it's installed, throughout, so that everyone has the same, some of the questions you might want to ask. But it's really up to you as to whether you want to have this. At this point, there's been no collective nod at bringing it all in 100% across the whole county.
I understand. And I think that's along the lines of where I would like to see things go, if at all possible, where everyone is actually utilizing the same systems and can rely on that utility and that interoperability across the entire county, as opposed to San Rafael's on board, Mill Valley's on board, but maybe Novato and or a couple other agencies are still pending or not certain. And so with that, if that was something that would be achievable at some point, I'd like to find out how would the costing be done? Is it going to be based on population, or how does this actually function in that regard as well?
I can answer that question in general. The pricing, Chief, is based fundamentally on the amount of acoustic systems that you actually have. And I also want to point out for the committee's knowledge, and I think you may already know it, it's not our assertion that the acoustic device is the only means to communicate. It's one channel of communication. Sending messages, emergency messages to your laptop, to your phone, through social media, through digital signage, through radio and TV are all output channels that we have available to us. And as has already been pointed out, there are environmental circumstances that won't necessarily always allow acoustic devices to reach the entire population. And with that said, frequently, as you guys know, the power may be turned off and the network might be down. And the only way to communicate might be through the LRAD device, the acoustic device. The communication channel that network uses is via satellite. So with the power off, it will still work. Where possible, we strongly encourage renewable power at the acoustic device sites. It's not not that every site can do it. Mill Valley, for example, is heavily wooded, so it doesn't lend itself. All of the acoustic devices have renewable or rechargeable batteries. We are able to monitor the health of the system remotely And when the batteries are down, draining, we can send messages, and we do that to Mill Valley. But you could, be theoretically to a point with no connectivity, no power, and as long as you could get to an internet network somewhere, the emergency management folks could send out acoustic messages to the community.
That's helpful information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill, could I just jump in and add a couple of comments as well?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so when Mill Valley installed their system, I think it's important to note that they had a legacy siren system, and those sites really were used as the basis for locating the LRAD devices. The LRAD system also has the capability, in addition to sending out the voice message, to sending out siren type messages, right? The audible, which have a deeper penetration, what we found, than just the audible voice. So there are some options within that system. And Southern Marin signed a PO today for 5 sites that we're putting in this year, and then we've proposed some additional sites next year. So to Chief White's question, I know in Southern Marin and Mill Valley that we've been sort of moving forward with trying to expand that down in the south to provide that what we think is an additional tool in the notification system.
And Mr. Danforth, I'm imagine that if there are cities and towns that would like to have in-person demonstrations, that would be possible to set up with you.
By all means.
And just curious, from the point at which an agency wants to get into contract, how long does it typically take to get the system installed?
Well, I hate to answer a question with that depends, but Laguna Beach is about to finish its installation. That began just when COVID hit, and it was put on the back burner for quite some time. And it's almost now fully installed, but that's with the Laguna getting back to work and having the resources to go do it. A typical answer in the case of Mill Valley, and maybe you folks can help, but I think Mill Valley was in the order of 3 months.
Just curious with the mounting on the poles. I don't know the height; it may vary. But are the poles also used for other things? That the city might be interested in. Like a Wi-Fi, citywide Wi-Fi, or
Yeah, absolutely. And
surveillance
I
equipment,
put
etc.
cameras in that same area, that same arena, because the video is compressed, digitized, and can be brought back to the emergency management center quite easily now. And I think the whole process of deciding where these goes where the acoustic device has to include an element of, how well does it fit into the environment? In Mill Valley, you'll notice above the fire station, they're in the cupola or whatever that is up there. In Laguna Beach, there's been a great deal of attention paid to making things blend in or not be an eyesore. So in some cases, we may actually accept degraded performance from the acoustic device, for example, by mounting it in the middle of a building instead of, on the edge of a building. But it meets the demand from the visual appearance of the thing. So we would also try that you may have in your community already poles up for other things. And with the right analysis from a load perspective and a weight and mass, we're happy to go on anything that you may already have up. And if you want us to put in new poles, which we are doing in Laguna Beach, it's a resource by which you could use to hang other things, to answer your question directly.
And what's the expected life expectancy of the devices before they need to be replaced or upgraded?
Sir, our experience is mainly in the military, U.S. military principally. So the acoustic devices we sold to the U.S. Navy, just as an aside, there's between 2 and 5 LRAD acoustic devices on every U.S. service combatant. The ones we shipped 12 years ago are now coming back. Where in almost all cases, they are still functional. They are showing the effects of corrosion in that environment that they live in. So the United States Navy has recently put an IDIQ in place with us to begin to replace the most environmentally affected units in the fleet. I'm not boasting too much about the company, but we have almost no warranty expense. The equipment is designed to all MIL standards. It's been selected by the US Navy, the US Army, the US National Guard, the US Air Force, by armies and navies around the world. And it's because of the resilience of the design and the build. So we're quite proud of it, and very glad to have the opportunity to provide our systems to all you folks on this call.
Thank you. And just one last question. You were saying that it could be tied in with other notification systems. Is there any connection to the weather radios, the hazard radios?
To the weather, certainly. A layer in our GEM platform is weather. To the radio, have integrated with AM digital signs that are turned on by, you turn your car radio on AM and then get information.
Okay.
We are integrating with that in Riverside.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Genesis?
Terrific. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
See ya.
Thank you.
All right. So let's now go out to the public. I guess they're gone. Well, let's see what the public, if there's any questions there.
And I'm looking for any raised hands. I'll pause a little bit. And I don't see any raised. No, I do see a raised hand now. And Stephen, please unmute yourself and speak.
Good, yeah. I participated in the test of this in Los Gatos about a couple of years ago. And one of the things I noticed was that up in the canyons, especially if somebody had their window closed, like at night in the winter or summer when it was really hot and the air conditioning running, there was no way it could be heard. So one of the things that we would need to tell everybody is that if you're at a distance, don't depend exclusively on being able to hear that warning.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons, and I think that any community that wants to consider it should go through some analysis about that and take a look. But it's very encouraging to hear that it's more and more integrated with other systems that we're going to rely on, Zonehaven, et cetera. So I was not aware of that partnership.
And I'm looking at any other raised hands from the public. We have no further raised hands from the public. But I think I did see Rich with his hand up.
Yeah, I just was going to point out that these really are considered outdoor warning systems. So we tested in Sleepy Hollow, and it's true, if you have a modern home with double pane windows and insulation and whatnot, it's really not designed to penetrate that. That's not the basic idea of the thing. I was at the Office of Emergency Services in San Francisco when we replaced, I think, 60 of them in San Francisco and put another 20 in. And once again, that was the whole purpose of it, to warn people when they're outdoors. It doesn't mean you can never hear it when you're at home, but I think Stephen's experience is what we should be looking at.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, if there's no other question from the public, then Mark, we'll move on to the next item.
And I'm just moving Charlotte in as a panelist so she can present. Okay,
great. So just as a reminder, Charlotte Jourdain is helping to coordinate the evacuation study and also the integration of Zonehaven, and she's here to give us an update. Welcome, Charlotte.
And I think you're muted, Charlotte, if you're talking.
Apologies. It's only been a year, but I still do that. Can you all, let's see, I'm gonna share my screen. Can you see my screen, the presentation? Okay.
You can.
Okay, so thank you to the members of the Operations Committee and members of the public. Good afternoon. So my goal here today is to present you with an update on the implementation of Zone Haven for Marin County, and dovetail into the progress on our evacuation risk assessment that we previously discussed in January and February. So briefly, just a recap, Zone Haven is a tool to prepare, train for, and manage a live evacuation. And the risk assessment is an additional prevention effort that we are looking at implementing to reduce risks that might affect the success of an evacuation. It's currently at the pre-RFP stage, meaning that the RFP has been written but not released, in part because we feel we need to wait on Zone Haven to fully understand what's entailed in that, and that's what I'm going to discuss today. So starting with Zone Haven, I don't know if you remember this graph from my last updates, but we had the initial kickoff and planning meeting on February 17th and started onboarding team leaders and users on the 24th. And then we're working towards getting agency approved zones for all of the county. As of today, we are 80% zone approved. And that is a major milestone that we need to reach 100% before we can launch into these other workflows that are essentially enriching the platform, the Zone Haven platform, with all these other things that we want to build it with to make it as useful as possible. So I'll just speak for a moment to the agency approval of the zones. Here in Marin, previous to Zone Haven, we had 124 mutual threat zones up here on this upper image. And then separately, from before even contracting with us, Zone Haven built 298 zones out of their own software program. So not sort of one was a very field-based approach, and the other one was very sort of theoretical or computer-generated approach. So where we're landing now is this, obviously we're going to have more zones than the initial number of multiple thread zones. The goal is to have continuous zones throughout the county, and this actually, Zone Haven provides this regional approach where counties to the north of us and so on would have zones butting up against the county line, so there's like complete coverage there. But this process I'm hearing was very educational, and Zone Haven primarily adopted all of the mutual threat zones in the wildland urban interface with a few exceptions. They made additional splits to zones in San Rafael, Sausalito, and Corte Madera based on Zone Haven's sort of determinations. And they added zone in Southern Marin, and then the larger zones in the west might need further split. But really what this says is that there's actually a really good match between the existing mutual threat zones and the Zone Haven design zones. And that's a validation for us. The validation is that, the software system essentially comes up with the same conclusions as, the fire service on the ground who knows the forest and knows where the threat comes from and how to best evacuate. So that's very reassuring, I think, and it's sort of a proof of concept for us here. So, the goal again is continue here and to get to 100% zone approved, agency approved zone, and we think we can reach this goal by mid-May essentially. Until then, everything is internal facing, everything is private. As soon as we get to 100% of our zones approved and vetted by the agencies, Zone Haven will publish them on this website, community.zonehaven.com, which is public facing. And that takes, it's a switch essentially, right? The next step would be to integrate the zones with our community warning system. And it sounds like at some point, Genesis perhaps. And that's also a fairly quick process of a couple of hours or so. We can reach that likely by the end of May. The bulk of the work, though, is to continue to detail out the zones pre-plans and enrich them with information that allow us to better understand what would happen in the event of an evacuation. So last time I provided you with an update, I discussed, we had conversations between the Transportation Authority of Marin and Zone Haven, and came out of that, there is some data that's already available and could already be integrated into Zone Haven. Namely data on the number of lanes across the county, volume to capacity ratio, modified population counts based on observed patterns, and observed speed patterns as well throughout the day. So TAM is going to provide this information to Zonehaven, and Zonehaven is looking at integrating that as soon as they're done with the first phase of approving all the zones. So that's, you know, that's a real bonus for us. And I think this speaks to our sort of instinct of holding off on the RFP until we can really better understand the power and the capacity of Zonehaven as a tool, and then look at how we fill the gaps. The other things we need to do also is to, for each zone, once they're approved, identify critical evacuation facilities, potential routes, exit and arrival points, and traffic control points, obviously. And then we need to run internal drills and practices to define and redefine for ourselves these evacuation procedures, and start sort of envisioning what are some of the structural or on the ground challenges that we're facing, and are there things that we can modify, you know, in terms of intersection, in terms of vegetation alongside the roads, or any other factor, location of evacuation facilities or other, that we can act upon given what we know in Zonehaven. So that's where the Zonehaven project sort of ends, and then the risk assessment is designed to really do that, right? So we're waiting on the zone pre-plans to get a clear idea of the gaps to fill, what information is already in Zonehaven, what's missing, and how would any missing information enhance evacuation planning, and how can the risk assessment bridge that gap? So that is why we have not yet released this assessment that I realize we've been discussing for a while, but the two projects sort of initially evolved together, and then it was determined that one really is the priority before actual fire season, and the risk assessment comes next to as a sort of like additional tool. So I want to reassure you that the RFP is done, it's there, we could release it, you know, pending your review, of course, we could release it very quickly. But I think I've made the case, I hope I made the case today, that it really makes sense to wait a little further. It makes sense for the fire service to, or the, you know, members of the OES, also sheriff and so on, to work together around this Zonehaven tool and start working out their procedures. In the meantime, what I'll continue to do is continue outreach to potential respondents to make sure we get quality bids for our RFP, and continue research on possible data sources. I'm also working with TAM to iron out access to their traffic model, and you know, just small little things, but essentially we're ready to go. We could flip the switch anytime, but we think there's value in waiting and identifying where the gaps are, so that we can come out with an RFP that's targeted and gets us even a better product than Zonehaven already is. So now I'll stop sharing, and I'll answer. Do I take questions or?
Any questions for Charlotte? Charlotte, I have a question. With regards to the timing of sharing this information publicly, that is, you know, I realize we're waiting on the analysis now, and that will happen in time, but Zonehaven as a tool that people will have to become, you know, familiar with, to educate them on how it works, the websites to go to, the real-time information, you know, obviously we're going to have to practice, etc. But I know some agencies have evacuation maps that they have already prepared, you know, before all of this got completely dialed in. And I would imagine some of the fire chiefs and maybe city managers are wondering whether they should be holding back some of the you know, updated information or their evacuation maps, resending those, waiting for Zonehaven to roll out. And I'm just wondering if there's a timing around when they expect that we could begin educating the public and it could actually be used.
Okay.
You want me to handle that one, Charlotte?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Okay, Bill, I think each agency has their subject matter expert working in the multi-agency teams. And so like Dimitri, for you, should have a great read whether or not the zones that Novato already had are going to be the zones that are going to be adopted in Zonehaven. In fact, Novato it is going to be a straight wash. I don't think there were any changes. So for each agency, reach out to your multi-agency team member to get the feel. For the most part, it's 90+% the zones that we'd already had drawn are staying the same. And we're also really driving towards keeping the community-based names rather than having a number system. We feel that a zone based on a community name means much more to a resident than a number means to a resident. However, some of the zones were a little bit too large, and I'll use Sleepy Hollow as an example. Sleepy Hollow had some enormous zones that would not be effective during a 3-acre fire that's on up at the end of the hollow. So, and other agencies across the state have learned that their zones were drawn too big. So we're potentially shrinking some of the zones, but instead of giving them a full new name, they could be Sleepy Hollow East, Sleepy Hollow West, Sleepy Hollow North, or give it an A, B, or C after it. But for the most part, the zones have been staying the same, except for areas that didn't have zones. Much of West Marin didn't have zones drawn for it. So,
Yeah, and just
Sorry, Charlotte, go ahead.
to add one more thing, so literally the update we got from Zone Haven yesterday is that as soon as the zones are approved, publicizing them is a matter of 2 hours. It can be done on the same day. So it's really about just getting all the agencies to approve their zone, and then it's up on the website, you know, it's live. In fact, the community, if you allow me to share my screen one more time. Sorry. The website that this is going to be on is this one. Oh, can you see this?
you can see it, Charlotte.
Yeah, it's already live. This website is already live. It's just there's no zones there because we haven't approved them. But the minute we approve them, they go there directly. The public could actually already be oriented towards this website at this point with like a sort of save the date kind of, you know, message if that's desired.
Okay, there we go. I know that when we launch new tools like Pulse Point, for example, we had a big rollout and tried to get as much buzz about it as possible. And so I probably should know this, but does Zone Haven have that built into their rollout plan? I mean, is that something
Yeah,
that we can help point to?
This is something that's included in the rollout, the setup fee that MWPA contracted Zone Haven for. So the public information campaign is part of that.
And they call it the Know Your Zone campaign.
Know Your Zone, yeah.
So Charlotte, if you can just stay on for a minute, why don't we, is there any other questions from the board here? I guess we're not a board. I hope you're not bored. Mark, can we go to public, please?
And I'm looking for any raised hands from the public, and I'll pause a little bit to give people some time. And I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, very good. Charlotte, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, next item up is going to be Rich Shortall, and he is going to, I believe, do a couple of things for us around projects. Aren't you, Rich?
So Chief Tyler, I did have a question about that. I wasn't sure if you were looking just for an update on what we're doing currently, or if you wanted a projection for the future requests.
Certainly currently, if you wanted to share some of the highlights about what you're proposing, we'd be happy to listen to those as well.
Great, thanks very much. Well, everybody has the report. It's fairly self-explanatory, so I think I'll just go over some of the highlights. The webinars keep going on. We had another successful webinar this month. About 225 people attended it. The one that we're going to be doing in May should be kind of interesting and timely because we're going to ask the ESP group to come in and explain their defensible space recommendations, which I think are very good. Related to the chipper program, there's been concerns raised about bird nesting. So we're going to have a segment to help homeowners to know what to look for around that. And then lastly, Chief Tyler has graciously appointed someone from the Nevada Fire Department to explain how, and I think this is typical of all of the D-space inspection programs go, how those evaluations take advantage or recognize environmental concerns along with the fire safety concerns. We have our workshops coming up. First one's coming up next week. I hope you're doing your best to promote them. I really appreciate all the chiefs for nominating people to do the speaking. Everybody's been very helpful on that. I think they'll be quite interesting. This work with the landscape professionals, we've actually finally 98% finished our project for them, which is a generic training program for all landscape professionals with wildfire science and how it impacts the work that they're doing. It's going to be going probably Tuesday or Wednesday next week for final review to the Contractors Association itself. And then we're UC Marine Master Gardeners are helping that. They've taken to take one last pass on it. The home hardening contractors, just real quick on this. This is a planning project. As we all know, home hardening has become the high level of interest for everybody, but it's actually hard to find people to do that work. So this is a program that is designed to lay out a blueprint for recruiting, training, equipping, and basically finding organizations to bring people in to do that work. Much like the article that was in the Independent Journal today, fire safety in California is creating a lot of job opportunities. And this is another one that's out there. And we support and applaud all of the recommendations that were in the IJ today. And this will line up pretty well with that. Fifth grade program's going good, working with the schools. We're doing a lot of translation work, supporting the people who are doing the inspection programs. A lot of work with the Firewise communities. They keep growing. We're still making videos in a timely manner and our newsletters and so forth. I'm just going through this quickly. And probably the big one that's out there that everybody I think is interested in is the Chipper program. And the new program will be starting on May 17th. We have selected the contractors who are going to do the performance in that. We actually have the first signed contract came in today. Probably by now, the second one is done. We're working with two of them. Have a really good selection process. We have two new managers for the program. They're really very excited about Stephen Peters and Brendan Devlin. I think will do a fantastic job. So that program is off and running. And we've had a lot of support and help from all of you on the planning team for that. And we very much appreciate it. So I guess we'll have another meeting soon to discuss the future proposals to the MWPA for next year's projects. But we have submitted 18 projects. We'll be doing a lot of what we did last year and more. So we're very excited about what's to come. Glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Rich. Yeah, we have a question from Garrett.
Sorry. Hi, Rich. Hey, yeah, thanks. Sorry, I know my staff's been reaching out to you for some things, but will MWPA have a grant program in place for this year's Chipper Days?
So the Chipper Days themselves would be independent of a grant program, right? So everybody's getting 2 rounds of chipper service. The grant program, and Mark can probably speak much better to this to me than that, it's not fully developed yet. And I'm assuming it would be in part of next year's, meaning 21-22 cycle for MWPA. Mark?
I'm not sure I 100% understand Garrett's question. So Garrett, people won't be applying for grants for Chipper Days. Chipper Days are just going to be scheduled to be cycled through all of the communities within the MWPA jurisdiction. And each community, each area is going to be getting 2 visits.
Yeah, I think my question, actually, I understand it. I think.
Okay, all right.
My question was, like, for Chipper Days, that envisions the homeowner actually clearing the brush on their property, putting out the curb for pickup. We have obviously some households that can't even afford to hire somebody to do that work on their property. And sort of the question was, would a grant program be available for some homeowners who qualify to get a grant to clear their property, to stick it out so it can be picked up for Chipper Day?
And we are proposing a low-income grant program, both at core levels, and then numerous agencies are putting in for local mitigation low-income grant programs as well.
Oh, so but that'd be available for this year's Chipper Days? Or?
Starting July 1. It wouldn't be available till after July 1, like
July.
Rich was saying.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Oh, I'm sorry, Rich, one last question. I know you go twice. How many do you think you could do in a day? That's a question. It's always.
So based on experience last year, train obviously a little bit of factor in size of piles. Our goal is something around 25 to 30 pickups a day per crew. We're running 4 crews a day. So we're looking at somewhere between 100 and 125 pickups countywide every day.
Countywide every day. So, sorry, this is Fairfax. So for Fairfax, if people sign up, that means for that day, for that Firewise, maybe 20 to 25.
So probably the best way to look at this is when you go in to register, our cap for the day is 30. If we exceed that, you go on a waiting list. If people drop off, then you get moved up. We evaluate how many people are on the waiting list towards the end of the week. We've engineered some extra days into the program. And in the past, we've actually been able to accommodate anybody who signed up. But we can't make an absolute guarantee of that, because one of the tricky things about this is trying to guesstimate percentage of participation. So we'll be looking very carefully about that as the program goes forward. And if we need to, we'll come back and recommend some adjustments to it.
Okay, thanks, Rich.
And I think something to clarify, Garrett, is that when Rich talks about capping the sign-offs for 30, it's not capping the sign-offs for 30 for the entire town of Fairfax. It's for this one of the structured defense zones that's within Fairfax, which there are multiple of those zones.
Yeah, not only is that a good point, but oftentimes one zone fills up and then it's light the next day. So you can just bump them to the next day and pick them up then.
Okay. And Gary, just one thing wanted to add. I have noticed looking at some of the action items and priorities that people have submitted for consideration of the work plan, that some agencies have selected to include grant funding, whether it's hardening or fuel reduction, in their local amounts or in their DSpace amounts. So you may have something there. So that could be helpful as well to you guys. Okay. Any other questions for Rich? Looks like Chief Pomey.
Yeah, Rich, thank you very much for the report. Very informative. I just wanted to ask in regards to the alert and warning red flag signs. Is that program still in place? And I apologize if I missed something. We do have one here at Station 17, and it's positioned, right here on the corridor. So if those have already been distributed, great. But I would be interested in, even if I had to fund one sign to replace the fire safe Marin sign we have here. So maybe we connect offline or.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up, and I think that's worth updating to the group. So there are, as we know, around the county, some larger, we'll call them flip signs, which are to be designed to be placed on major thoroughfares. We had enough money approved by MWPA in this current funding cycle to fabricate 17 signs. So they're almost done. When that's finished, we're going to make them available on a pro rata basis per zone. So arbitrarily, if 25% of the and this is of the share of MWPA core funding for Novato, then 25% of those signs will go to Novato and so forth. So we're hoping, and I know Chief White is very interested in this. We're hoping that people will be quite enthusiastic, and actually, there we go. That's how enthusiastic he is. Yeah, that's what they look. That's it. I think they're great. And is that yellow one is designed, that's removable, and you can change the messaging on it. So we hope we'll think about maybe even coming into a proposal to purchase another batch of them for next year would be great, because I think they're an amazing tool and really would like to get behind them. So I expect in about 2 weeks, the signs will be ready. I'll be reaching out, and then we'll do the distribution on a pro rata basis.
Thank you.
Looks like Chief White has some show and tell for us.
I think Chief White's staff likes to have that outside his door, whether they know they should go into office or not. Sorry, I had to.
Looks like Darren has a question.
I was just gonna say, unfortunately, I don't have any blinds or anything. You can just see right inside of here, so no warnings. I just let everyone come in, bombard me. Rich, can you clarify one question? I think there was some question about costing on signs. I had heard two different numbers that were far apart. What are the less expensive signs and what are the more expensive signs?
So the signs that you just showed there, including the insert,
Yes,
is, and it does go down with volume.
right.
But for what we did, for about 20 signs, it's about $365 a piece. But they're very durable. It's made by a company that makes these outdoor signs, so they should last a very long time. So $365 for those. There's another sign, since we're doing show and tell, bear with me, because this is actually, to be honest, I think this is kind of cool. So I have to change my background. You won't be able to see it. So every Firewise community has a sign like this. A very inexpensive way to do the red flag warning is to have one of these color form that goes right on top of this. And we've done a lot of testing. They're easily attached with a very simple clip. You put 4 of these guys on like this, and it holds a great, even very strong wind. We plan to we're making a request on the back of these to have a safety message that would vary. So be a twofold use. On a red flag day, you can use it like this. On other days, there would be a wide variety of safety messages available for the communities to put up there. If you're not a Firewise community, you still can put this on A-frames and whatnot. So part of our request to MWPA for next year is to purchase 500 of those signs, because at that volume, they're $11.50 a piece. So that's really pretty inexpensive. It's very cost efficient. And even if one blew away or whatever, at that rate, we could, it's still very effective. And then we would have a very large number of varying messages. And our plan is to, basically, there's kind of a way that we have envisioned where we can trade signs so that you can have different messages in your communities and so forth. So that's an $11.50 sign. The other one's $365, but 2 very different functions.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions for Rich? Okay, if we can go out to the public, Mark, please.
Unmuting myself, and that gave the people time to raise hands. So I'm looking for any raised hands, and I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's see. I noticed that Chris had to drop off. It's after 4 now. I just want to double check and make sure we still have a quorum, Mark, in terms of the numbers.
We did drop below a quorum.
We dropped below. Okay.
I
So
have
that means we can still report out, but we just can't vote on anything. I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Actually, I think if you start a meeting with a quorum, once you're in, don't you get to continue? I thought that's allowed. I don't know. But I
we
guess
can continue, but we don't have any items to vote on today. So for the rest of the way, so I think we can continue with the reports.
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, let's see. So next thing we've got then is committee reports. This is number 9. There's 2 ad hoc committees that are currently been stood up. One is the work plan ad hoc committee and then the budget ad hoc committee. So we're going to start just with the work plan ad hoc committee. This is made up of Chief Jason Weber, Fire Chief Chris Tubbs, Fire Chief Darren White, City Manager Todd Cusimano, and myself. And so we received on Monday, we received a series of priorities to be considered for this next year's work plan. The items included programs and potential projects that will become projects after they receive their environmental review. But we're considering these right now, areas of concern that came from the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, and then priorities to be funded. Just so you have an idea, before I go any further, I want to thank and recognize Ruben, who I believe is over on the attendee side. Yeah, very instrumental in being able to deliver within the timeframes that we had set up. So thank you to Ruben, to Lynn Osgood, and all of the different members that worked on that. Thank you very much. So they were able to deliver approximately 130 different priorities to take a look at. And the breakdown of those basically is there's about 56 that fall into the core category, if you will, 33 into the local, and approximately 20 into the defensible space, spread out across our 5 different zones. And then in addition to that, or included in that, the MWPA also submitted, the administration submitted 3 core projects, and then Fire Safe Marin, as you heard Rich say, had a total of 18. There were 16 that were falling under one specific cost that sort of lumped together, and then 2 that have separate numbers for. So I have not yet totaled up the total cost, but it will likely exceed what is available, although we'll have to see. We also spent some time with the environmental law firm discussing language around the CEQA compliance to make sure that all of these that are submitted are consistent and can make sure that we're moving forward properly. We want to make sure that we can give confidence to the public that the environmental considerations that may accompany these priorities with regards to vegetation removal, the scopes, et cetera, are properly reviewed and vetted. And so we're working on standardizing some of the language so that it makes sense. We're making sure that there are various project design features that are built in from the California VTP, those checklists. So they're basically checkpoints along the way that you're under consideration. And we want to make sure that we're going to get the environmental compliance so that we can file for those prior to the full release of funds on those. So that is where we are. And there was also some discussion around, with our defensible space, the ministerial aspects of doing D-space evaluations and inspections versus what's the other word? Discretionary. Those two are very important terms. So we're working on that as well. So today is not the day that we're going to share this completely with you, but our ad hoc committee is committed to continuing to work through these things. And one of the main things that we're going to have to focus on too is we understand people have submitted for their local amounts. We understand that people have submitted for their D-space amounts. Those are largely, at the full, control of those agencies that have done that. The areas that will require additional discussion, I think, are really around the core projects, what people put in for core. So we want to make sure that the funds that go to core, let's say, for example, that the MWPA administration had applied, for example, the grants. So there's grants for low income people of access and functional needs, et cetera, that may need home hardening, matching grants, and then also for defensible space. So that amount would come off the top if that was agreed to. All of that would come off the top before everyone had their zones, their percentages returned back to their core funds. Does that make sense to you all? The idea is to keep it proportional, but to agree on those things that need to come off the top first. Mark, do you want to chime in on that at all?
Yeah, and a clarification for the things that will be coming off the top, and the Fire Safe Marin public education projects and some of the other Fire Safe Marin projects, the chipper days, for that matter, are things that will come off the top because we are looking at all 5 of the geographical areas. However, we will track how many grants have been funded in Southern Marin, how many grants have been funded in Central Marin, and in Fire Safe Marin is tracking costs spent for chipper days so that we can apply them to the geographical area, so we could adhere to the 80% of the funds that have been gained in a geographical area or spent in that geographical area over a 5-year average.
So there's going to be, additional discussions around that, and we'll likely, the next time we meet, we may hold a call for a special meeting to do a full presentation to everyone. We will also continue to work with the ATC to clarify if there additional language needs to be modified. We'll work back up and down through those channels. So we are on track, although we do have a very short time frame. The other thing off the top of the hour, you heard Mark say, we're excited to have that project manager on board. We had hoped that if they were here now, we would hand all this stuff to them and let them manage, let them, group it, collate it, help with some of these discussions. And so they're just not quite there yet. I think it's mid-May. So there's some additional work that we're going to be doing. And Mark is also using some of the resources that they have there to help us. So it's not just falling on the ops ad hoc to do all the legwork on this. We appreciate that support. Are there any questions that you all have at this point? We still plan on staying on schedule, which is, partway through May, we should be able to have a fairly set, priority list together. We could then release that and discuss that further with the ops group, again, whether that's a special meeting or not, and then get a draft recommendation together and bring that up to the full, all of the directors for prior to June would be our goal. Any questions on that? I know Darren, you brought up earlier, could we do, the Genesis systems, the LRAD, across the entire county? Certainly, some people have put in core funding for that for their areas, but I think we would have to have, greater discussions if we wanted to try and provide that consistency across the whole county. I think from past experience, it works for some areas, it doesn't work for others. And we've got a time period for this to expand and roll. So I don't know, I didn't anticipate us right now taking on some of those discussions, but we would bring that back to ad hoc. But I am curious to see, what other people have, any comments that they might have at this point, or what are your expectations as ops meeting members of when you'd have further input? Okay, I don't hear any. I know you're out there. I can hear you breathing.
I was just contemplating the idea that we're not going to be able to rely on some external help to help us with what we're trying to assemble and put together, kind of like we had anticipated. And so, given that, do we have a hard and fast deadline where we're trying to assemble everything to make sure, as we spoke on the other day, that everything aligns with the language and the templates and everything like that? Do we have a set deadline that we've established for that purpose?
I mean, it all has to happen in the next 30 days, essentially.
Right. And so my guess is 10 days out, maybe we should be pushing for that as opposed to later, and then making sure that we look at it one last time and moving forward after that with still some time to spare. What do you think?
And
yeah, no, I agree. We want to cushion.
We have a finance committee meeting for the MWPA scheduled for May 14th. And I know that's just a little over 2 weeks away. And if we can have at least the priorities drafted by then that gives the finance committee an opportunity to look at it. We have a board meeting on May 20th. In a perfect world, that could be when we approve the work plan. However, I understand it's tight, and perhaps we may need to schedule a special meeting prior to June 1st so that we can approve this prior to June 1st.
Does it look doable that we can actually get everything pushed to the board by the 20th for a final vote and be done?
I have 80–90% confidence we can do it.
Yeah.
As was stated at the Citizens Oversight Committee meeting last night, we just request that some of us don't get phone calls for a little while because we're going to be working on it.
I'm just glad it's not fire season right now. Please.
Yes, exactly.
No. Everyone's working very hard, and I really appreciate how much the ATC went through to get those things together. I think it was a fantastic effort with much clearer information that makes it a much better process in the long run. Okay, any other questions from our group? Okay, if we could go mark out to see if anybody has raised hands in the public, please.
And I'm looking for any raised hands. And we have one raised hand at this time. Good afternoon, Carolyn. Please unmute yourself and you're good to go.
I think I did. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. My name's Carolyn Longstreth. As you may know, I'm a member of the Fire and Environment Resilience Network, also known as FERN. You know, we really appreciate the time pressures that you all are under, and also your commitment to getting things right. You know, there's so many things about this organization that are getting stood up for the first time, and I appreciate it's not easy. So as you may know, Fern has pointed out some problematic issues about the new work plan forms and hope that changes can be made to address our concerns. Our basic point is we'd like the forms and procedures to disclose facts pertinent to environmental impacts and review before these projects are fully approved. So that those concerned about these impacts, for example, on special status species, can flag issues in these projects or potential projects in time for them to be addressed. You know, for us, this is really important. It's crucial that we work this out. So CEQA, I'm glad that you've been consulting with the council. I bet they've told you that it's necessary to afford a meaningful opportunity for public review on these environmental issues. That's about it. We're really looking forward to hearing more details about what you're considering. You know, let us know if we can help you, give you some feedback in the meantime, anything like that. So thank you again.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate it.
Yep.
And we did receive the emails. I know Lynn took a look at the additional comments that you had for the form, so we appreciate that.
Sure.
And I'm looking for.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to understand the concern there. I think I understood her, Mrs. Longstreth, to indicate that she wanted to make sure that any environmental impacts would be reviewed and communicated prior to approval of the projects. Is that correct?
Yeah, and Darren, if you, or Bill, if you don't mind, I can step in on this one. And it's semantics of the word project. The way we had been viewing the word project is different than the way CEQA considers the word project. So once a proposal in CEQA gets considered to be a project, that means the environmental compliance has been done. Once it's approved as a project, environmental compliance has already been done. So that's why we will go down the path of approving priorities and areas of concern. And then when the environmental compliance is completed, that's when it will be approved as a project.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the term that the attorney was using was when it reaches a point where it's unrevocable, that's when it's a project. So any other comments?
We have one more raised hand from the public. And the hand went down before I had a chance to. Okay, now just a second.
You're the unmute.
Stephen Keese, you're good to go.
It's actually Pamela Meggs. I'm using his computer for a minute. I'm on the Sierra Club. I'm on the executive committee board, and as well, listening to Carolyn just talk about concerns about projects and how they're done, and we're feeling the same way, and we're actually looking at the ESP draft, et cetera. But I just wanted to chime in to support what she's talking about. And we have a lot of issues around bird nests. So that's where I just wanted to let you know what we're thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And looking for any additional raised hands, and I'm not seeing any, Bill.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next budget ad hoc group was, was our finance ad hoc group. I know Chris was on earlier and he did share something with me, but I also know there's other folks like Mark. I don't know if Mark wants to chime in too, but I could certainly start by reading what Chris left for me. Mark, does that sound right? Or...
We do have Chris back.
Oh, we have him. I should look up.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add about from the finance ad hoc committee?
So I don't know if you shared what I sent you in the text, but what I had prepared today was that the finance subcommittee will be meeting on the 12th. Recently, we received an estimate from Elisa on the projected revenues for the next fiscal year. So we'll be working through refining those numbers so that we can get them out to each agency so they can do their own budget projections. And that'll give us something to work with for the ops committee as well as we work through the proposals that have been listed. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. Any questions for Chris from this group? Okay, Mark, if we can go out and see if the public has any questions.
And I'm looking for any raised hand. We do have one. Rebecca, if you unmute yourself, you're ready to go.
And Chris said finance committee meeting the 12th, and we've been hearing 14th.
That would be the ad hoc finance subcommittee of the operations committee is the 12th, but then the MWPA finance committee on the 14th.
Great, thank you.
And looking for any other raised hands, and I don't see any.
All right, so we are in the home stretch here. The next item is just any informational items. Is there anything from the group that you'd like to share? Okay, doesn't look like it. Are there any, let's go out to the, anything for the public on information items?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Next item is committee members request future agenda items. Is there anything that you all would like to discuss at our next meeting specifically? Okay. Seeing none, Mark, if we can go out to the public.
Looking for raised hands, and I do not see any.
Okay. Then if I can get them, next time is motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right. Darren, thanks very much.
Second.
Dave has seconded. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Hopefully that was worth your while this afternoon. If you have any additional questions or follow-up about the work plan, please feel free to contact me. And good luck with the rest of your week.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.